Beyond the Clef is presented by Director's Choice.
Welcome to Beyond the Clef. We're live at TMEA 2018, and I'm joined by Brett Farr, the Director of Fine Arts from Carrollton-Farmers Branch. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Great, thank you for being on the program.
Sure.
So, as Director of Fine Arts, you get to go through a lot of interviews, don't you?
Absolutely.
How many interviews do you think you go through a year? In a season?
75 or more.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So, you know a lot about that stuff.
Well, from a different side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say some of our viewers might be looking for a job or have maybe never interviewed before. So Let's talk about interview skills, that stuff. What do you see and what are you looking for when someone walks in the door and you're trying to go through the interview?
Well, we're looking for someone that is prepared in that they have a resume that's thorough. We look for someone that is positive, that looks professional when they enter the room, that is clear-spoken, and seems to have a purpose in what they are looking for, because they're interviewing us at the same time we're interviewing them.
I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Sure.
And when they go into the position, they just feel like they just want anything, and so they have to ask questions too.
Yeah, there's a time for people to ask questions, and it really needs to be a good fit for both the employer and the employee. We want all of our hires to feel like that they have found a good home, somewhere they can hone their craft and do good work. So we're looking for someone who is excited about teaching, and I think it's really important that they like kids and not just trying to find a job, but that they really want to teach kids.
What about ahead of time? Some of the communication and how do they start? Because it's really hard to be just a number, just an email name, and it's really nerve-wracking. In your case, for instance, if someone wants to get into your district, how should they approach that?
Well, there's several ways. We have a job fair in our district, and there's opportunity for people to come to that job fair.
I'm sure it's similar with many districts.
Sure. A lot of districts have job fairs. We have an online application system, and even though that's just normal, people need to understand that that's the first place we go to look. So if we have a vacancy, we're going to go to that online list, and people who have applied to our district, or in particular have attached to that job number, then they'll be right in front of me as far as their application goes, and then that gives me an opportunity to look at their resume, to read their letter of interest, to read what references say about them, and it gives me a little bit of a snapshot of this candidate before we actually make contact. People can also email me directly. My email address is on our district website, and I get quite a few people who just send me their resume, tell me that they're moving to Dallas and want to know if we're going to have any openings, and they just share their story with me. And so there are many ways. Sometimes we just actually post a particular job on our district website, and it might be the head band director at this particular school, and that gives people a little bit more information. And then, of course, we post all the time on TMEA website and other websites that people have access to.
Okay, and now tell me about how does somebody not just be another number? Because I'm sure for some of your applications, if you have an assistant choir director open up, you could get a myriad of applications. How do they stand out?
Well, you might be surprised in that a lot of people who apply don't fully complete the application, or maybe they're not fully certified, or they don't have references listed. So my advice is to complete the application as fully as possible. If there's something that cannot be included because maybe the certification isn't complete, or they haven't taken the PPR or content test, perhaps a note on an email saying, I'm scheduled to take this test at this time, I will be completed at this time, to give us further information. I think it's hard to make that distinction through an email or that kind of communication. I think where people make their most impact is in the actual physical interview, when they show up and the content of their interview. That's where people can make their mark.
Sure. And you talked about when they are literally coming in the door, more positive and making a good, clear communication. Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. I think the interview begins when you arrive, and your demeanor. Are you dressed professionally? Do you communicate well? Do you make good eye contact when you come into the interview? Do you look energized? Do you look like this is a job I really want? And as you answer questions, are you answering the question? I think a lot of people make a mistake in that they're asked a question and they talk about 10 other things, and sometimes before they ever get to the answer, or they just never answer, they talk around the question rather than just answering the question. And my advice is always to answer the question first. And then if you want to provide some context for your answer, I think that's fine. But I think everybody appreciates someone who will simply answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. What about practicing for those questions?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's very difficult for, someone's a very articulate person, but it's a nervous experience to go through an interview with principals and a position of yours. Tell us about that kind of communication.
Well, here at TMAC has got 4 sessions or more, and I said it in one today, where fine arts directors are sitting at tables and potential applicants will sit around and we ask them questions, they respond, and then we gives us an informal setting where we can say, let's talk about your response, what was good about it, how could you make it better, and the other people at the table who are also potential candidates, they get to hear this and then they also get to contribute. So it's a real interesting collaborative setting where people have kind of like a practice go without any negatives. They can, and I think people are learning a lot about what to say, maybe what not to say. And a lot of first-year teachers have no classroom experience to draw on, so you can tell when you're interviewing someone who's done it, and they can really talk about the question because they've actually done it, and you can tell those who haven't had a chance to do it, they're coming more from a theoretical perspective that this is what I think I would do. And so there are ways to navigate that conversation, though, even if you haven't done it, to make you sound more prepared to do it and how you answer.
What if someone gets to the point where they just don't know the question in the interview, the horror moment, they're really scared about that? What do they do at that point?
Well, I think that they can probably, I would always appreciate honesty. You know, I think that they could say, I've not thought about that, and I need more time to ponder that. I'd be happy to respond to that in written form. I would hope that most interview questions would be of such a nature that you could answer it. If you know that you're interviewing for a choir position and your background is in choir, whether you've taught or not, I would think that you would have enough background knowledge to get close to the answer. If it's some question that just is not necessarily related to your subject, maybe it's some kind of an educational question, some philosophy of discipline management, and that is not within your scope of knowledge, I think you could probably, admit that and not be penalized for it. But I'm just thinking back to my interviews. Rarely do I have anybody who cannot at least get close to the topic I'm trying to get them to answer.
Okay, what about the resume? When you're looking at the actual resume document itself, what do you look for and what are some of the negatives?
Well, an unfocused resume is really hard to get through. I mean, it needs to be...
Tell me more about that.
Well, in other words, things are out of order. Like you don't have your degree at the top of the resume, it's at the bottom. Or you don't have your certification listed. Or you don't show where what your recent work past is, or where your student taught. And you just have information that is not valuable. You should always start with the most valuable information, which is your name, your contact information. And next should be your degree and certifications, because that's what everybody wants to know. Are you certified to do what we need you to do? And then from there, your experience is valuable for us to know. What have you been doing? How does it relate to what we're asking you to do? And then beyond that, you can go into other areas that you might want to. But my advice is to keep the resume as succinct and short as possible, because for every one job, we might interview 5 or 6 people, and we've got all these resumes. And some people list 5 and 6 pages of credits of past performances and this, that, and the other. And I guess it serves to let us know that they are experienced, and I think that's good. But very few people are going to sit and look at all that information. We just need a really tight resume that shows us your background and your ability to help us make a good decision.
What do you do when you contact the references? What kind of questions are you asking those candidates' references?
Well, we have an automated system in our district, and every district does that differently. So whenever a candidate applies online, a reference is automatically sent to whoever they list, and there are 5 or 6 questions that the automated asks, and it asks about how this person has done in a classroom setting, how they've done with classroom management, and other such questions. And we can read through those and see what. So oftentimes it's their principal if they already have a job, or it's their college professor, and we can see what they think about them. And then when we hone down to who we think we want, we'll make a physical call and explore, their work life and how they've been as a team player, and how they are with content, and how they are with their interactions with students and staff. All those kind of questions that might not show up on that regular reference sheet.
One of my principals, they always say that when they're looking at some stuff, if say they worked at their previous job and didn't list their principal as the reference, that always is a red flag, and that would be the first person they call.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that?
Well, it certainly makes you wonder why. And some people just are not prepared to tell their principal that they're leaving. There's no problem with the relationship. They're just not. They want to be pretty sure they've got something that looks good before they start stirring the waters at home. And I get that. But if you're serious about getting a position, your employer is going to want to talk to whoever you're working with now.
Right.
And so my advice is to be open and honest with your current employer and tell them that I'm looking at another position. It may not be because you're upset. It may be that it's closer to your home. It may be that it's an advancement in your career. Whatever the reason, I would just be open and say, so that you can get their willingness to be contacted.
Any fun horror stories you can tell us about interviews?
Well, I would hate to expose anybody that
of course
said something. I do think that I did have one time where we asked a teacher about their knowledge of ORF and Codives, an elementary teacher, who just looked at me and said, well, this is the part of the interview that I usually bomb. And my thought was, yes.
Good start.
Yeah, that is true.
You did it again.
but I think being forthcoming with your answers, being candid, being honest, and succinct is appreciated by everyone.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
This is a lot of great information, and I'm sure some people will be making use of this. Maybe somebody coming to you this summer.
Absolutely. We have a job fair today at TMEA.
So there you go.
Hopefully
I'm sure you'll have some people there.
That'd be great.
Well, thank you. Mr. Brett Farr, the Director of Fine Arts at Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD. Thank you for being on the program.
Sure.
And thank you for joining us at Beyond the Clef.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Beyond the Clef. For more great content, subscribe on our website at beyondtheclef.com. And be sure to follow us on YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, and Facebook.